The Wildflower and the Ranger by Oliver Hale. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Silver Creek as Eliza Montgomery stepped down from the stagecoach. Her legs trembled slightly after the 3-day journey from San Francisco, but she squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. This small mining town tucked into the Colorado mountains was nothing like the coastal city she'd left behind. The stagecoach driver handed down her trunk. "Miss Montgomery, the hotel's just down the street," he said, pointing to a 2-story building with a freshly painted sign. "Best accommodations in Silver Creek, though that ain't saying much." "Thank you," Eliza replied, brushing dust from her traveling dress. She removed her gloves and surveyed the town, a single main street flanked by wooden buildings in various states of repair. Men in worn clothing moved purposefully between the assayer's office, the general store, and the saloon. A few women were visible, most hurrying about their errands with determined efficiency. Silver Creek wasn't beautiful, but it had a certain rugged charm. In the distance, snow-capped mountains rose against an impossibly blue sky, a stark contrast to the fog-shrouded vistas of San Francisco. Eliza had come to sell her late brother Robert's claim. At 23, she had already endured more than her share of heartbreak and loss. First her parents to influenza, then Robert, her only remaining family, to a mining accident. Now she stood alone, her future uncertain. She hired a boy loitering nearby to carry her trunk to the hotel. As they walked, Eliza noted the curious glances from passers-by. Women were scarce in Silver Creek, and a young, unmarried lady traveling alone was cause for interest. At the hotel, she secured a modest room on the 2nd floor. After washing away the grime of travel and changing into a simple blue dress, she ventured downstairs to inquire about her brother's claim. "You'll want to speak with Marshal Wilder," the hotel proprietor advised. "His office is down the street, past the general store. He's been keeping an eye on your brother's property since the accident." The marshal's office was a small wooden building with a large window facing the street. Inside, a tall man with broad shoulders stood studying papers on a desk. His dark hair was cut short, and a badge gleamed on his chest. When he looked up, Eliza was struck by his striking blue eyes, keen and assessing. "Miss Montgomery," he said, recognition dawning in his expression, "we received word you were coming." He gestured to a chair. "I'm Marshal Thomas Wilder. I was sorry to hear about your brother." "Thank you, Marshal," Eliza replied, settling into the offered seat. "I've come to settle Robert's affairs and sell his claim." Something flickered in the marshal's eyes, concern, perhaps, or caution. "Miss Montgomery, there are some matters regarding your brother's claim that we should discuss." "What matters?" "The lawyer's letter said the claim was mine to dispose of as I see fit." "The claim is legally yours," Marshal Wilder agreed, "but there have been complications. Your brother discovered something valuable shortly before his death, something that's attracted unwanted attention." "Gold?" Eliza asked, her pulse quickening. "A rich vein, by all accounts. Robert was careful, told only a few trusted friends, but word spreads fast in mining country." The marshal's expression grew serious. "There have been attempts to jump the claim. I've stationed men there when possible, but I can't guarantee its security indefinitely." "I see," Eliza said, though in truth she was beginning to feel overwhelmed. "How soon can I sell it?" "That's the second complication. The most interested buyers are the Blackwood Mining Company. They've bought up most of the surrounding claims, but their methods are," he hesitated, "questionable at best. Your brother refused to sell to them, and there were threats made." "Are you suggesting they had something to do with his death?" The marshal's jaw tightened. "The official report says it was an accident, a cave-in. I have my doubts, but no proof." Eliza felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. "What would you advise, Marshal?" "Give me a few days to contact some legitimate buyers from Denver. In the meantime, I'd recommend keeping your plans private. Silver Creek isn't dangerous generally, but gold makes men reckless." As Eliza left the marshal's office, her mind whirled with this new information. She had expected to sell the claim quickly and return to San Francisco, perhaps open the small bookshop she'd always dreamed of. Now it seemed her brother's legacy was both more valuable and more dangerous than she'd imagined. Over the next several days, Eliza learned more about Silver Creek and its inhabitants. The town had sprung up 5 years earlier when silver was discovered in the nearby mountain. When that played out, most miners moved on, but a second boom came with the discovery of gold in the high country. Robert had arrived during this second wave, staking a claim in a remote valley. Eliza also learned more about Marshal Wilder. He had come west from Virginia after the war, seeking a fresh start. He had a reputation for fairness and integrity, rare qualities in a frontier lawman. The miners respected him, and even the rowdier elements thought twice before causing trouble when he was present. On her third day in town, Eliza decided to visit Robert's claim. Marshal Wilder insisted on accompanying her. "It's rough country," he explained as they set out on horseback early in the morning, "and I'd feel better making sure you arrive safely." Eliza was grateful for his presence as they followed a narrow trail into the mountains. Though raised in a family that valued female education and independence, she had limited experience with wilderness. The marshal rode slightly ahead, his posture alert as he scanned the landscape. "How did you become a marshal?" she asked as they paused to rest the horses beside a clear mountain stream. Thomas Wilder removed his hat, revealing a thin scar that ran along his temple. "I was a captain in the Union Army during the war. Afterward, I drifted west like many men, looking for something I couldn't quite name." His eyes moved to the distant peaks. "I found work as a deputy in a Kansas cattle town, then moved on to Colorado when the mining boom started. Silver Creek needed someone to keep order, and I needed a purpose." "And did you find it? Your purpose?" A small smile softened his features. "Most days I think so. Law doesn't always align perfectly with justice out here, but I do what I can." They continued riding higher into the mountains. By midday they reached a small plateau overlooking a valley. A crude cabin stood near the entrance to a mine shaft, with equipment scattered nearby. "Robert's claim," the marshal said, dismounting. He helped Eliza down from her horse, his hands strong and steady at her waist. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her. The cabin was simple but well built, with a stone fireplace and sturdy furniture that Robert had crafted himself. Eliza ran her fingers over the smooth wooden table, imagining her brother sitting there, planning his future, a future cut tragically short. "He spoke of you often," Thomas said quietly from the doorway. "He was saving every speck of gold to bring you west permanently." Eliza blinked back tears. "We were all the family each other had left. After our parents died, he took care of me, made sure I received an education." She picked up a small carved wooden box from a shelf. "He made this for my 16th birthday. He was proud of you. Said you had more sense and courage than most men he knew." "I wish I'd come sooner," she whispered. "Our last letters crossed in the mail. His inviting me to visit, mine promising I would come in the spring." After exploring the cabin, Thomas led her to the mine entrance. "This is where they found him," he said gently. The supports gave way. By the time his partner returned from town with supplies, it was too late. Eliza stood silently, imagining her brother's final moments. Had he been afraid? Had he suffered? Questions with no answers, wounds that time might ease but never completely heal. "I'd like to see the gold vein," she said finally. "Is it safe?" "The entrance has been reinforced, and I've inspected it myself. We won't go deep." Thomas lit a lantern and offered his arm. "Stay close." The mine tunnel was cool and damp, the walls supported by thick timber beams. They walked carefully, Thomas pointing out features of interest. About 50 feet in, he directed the lantern light toward a section of rock wall where a gleaming vein of yellow traced through the stone. "Your brother's discovery," he said. "Rich enough to make you a wealthy woman, Miss Montgomery." Eliza reached out, touching the cold stone with its thread of gold. "This is what cost him his life. Perhaps. Or perhaps it was simply fate." Thomas's voice was gentle. "Either way, it's yours now." As they emerged from the mine, Eliza noticed movement in the tree line at the edge of the clearing. Thomas saw it too, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. "Get behind me," he said quietly, steering her toward the cabin. "Someone's watching us." They had just reached the shelter of the cabin when 3 riders emerged from the trees. "Blackwood's men," Thomas muttered, positioning himself in the doorway. "Stay inside, Eliza." The lead rider, a burly man with a weather-beaten face, reined in his horse about 20 feet from the cabin. "Marshal," he called. "Fancy meeting you here." "Jed Harper," Thomas replied evenly. "These are private property. State your business." "Just passing through, checking boundaries of Mr. Blackwood's holdings." Harper's gaze shifted to the shadowed interior of the cabin where Eliza stood. "Heard Robert Montgomery's sister had come to town. Mr. Blackwood sends his condolences and would like to make her an offer for this claim." "Miss Montgomery isn't receiving offers at present," Thomas said. "You can tell Blackwood she'll consider legitimate bids when she's ready." Harper's expression hardened. "Blackwood doesn't like to wait, Marshal. And he doesn't like competition. This little patch of ground is surrounded by his claims. Makes sense for him to have it. Nevertheless, you're trespassing. I suggest you move along." The standoff lasted several tense seconds before Harper shrugged. "Have it your way, Marshal. But Blackwood won't take kindly to interference." He turned his horse. "Miss," he called to Eliza, think carefully about your situation. A woman alone in mining country faces many dangers. Mr. Blackwood can be a powerful friend or enemy. After the riders disappeared into the trees, Thomas remained vigilant for several minutes. We should head back to town, he said finally. I don't trust them not to return. As they rode back to Silver Creek, Eliza considered her options. Tell me about Blackwood, she said. Thomas's expression darkened. Ethan Blackwood arrived a year ago with money and ambition. He's bought up claims systematically, sometimes through fair means, sometimes not. Those who resist often suffer accidents or find themselves facing trumped-up charges. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? He's careful. Nothing can be proven. And he has connections in Denver, political allies who benefit from his success. Yet you oppose him. Thomas met her gaze steadily. I believe in justice, Miss Montgomery. Your brother was a good man who worked hard for what was his. I won't stand by while vultures circle what he left behind. In that moment, Eliza made her decision. I won't sell to Blackwood, no matter what he offers. It won't be easy standing against him. He's used to getting what he wants. So am I, Marshal Wilder. Eliza lifted her chin. My father raised me to recognize the difference between price and value. Robert valued his independence above all else. I won't dishonor his memory by surrendering what he fought to build. Thomas smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face and warmed his blue eyes. Your brother was right about you, Miss Montgomery. You do have courage. The following days fell into a pattern. Each morning, Eliza reviewed Robert's papers, learning about his mining operation. In the afternoons, she often found herself in the marshal's office, where Thomas shared what he knew about mining laws and potential buyers. A week after her arrival, Thomas introduced her to Jacob Winters, a mining engineer from Denver. Mr. Winters represents a consortium of investors interested in expanding operations in this region, Thomas explained. They're willing to buy your claim at a fair price. Winters confirmed this with an offer substantially higher than Eliza had expected. Your brother's discovery is significant, Miss Montgomery. My employers are prepared to develop it properly, with modern equipment and safety measures. And what of the miners who worked with my brother? Eliza asked. Robert mentioned partnerships in his letters. They would be offered positions, of course. Experienced men are valuable. The offer was tempting, but Eliza requested time to consider it. That evening, as she walked back to her hotel, she noticed a well-dressed man watching her from across the street. Something in his calculating gaze made her uneasy. Thomas materialized at her side. Ethan Blackwood, he murmured. It seems you've caught his attention. The man approached, his expensive coat and polished boots marking him as different from the typical Silver Creek resident. Miss Montgomery, he said, doffing his hat. I've been hoping to make your acquaintance. I'm Ethan Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood, Eliza acknowledged coolly. May I offer my condolences on your brother's passing. A tragic accident. Was it? Eliza asked, holding his gaze. Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes, anger perhaps or surprise at her directness. Mining is dangerous work, Miss Montgomery. All the more reason for operations to be consolidated under proper management. My brother managed quite well, Mr. Blackwood. Until he didn't. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. I understand you're entertaining offers for his claim. I'm prepared to double whatever Winters offered you. Thomas stiffened beside her, but Eliza placed a restraining hand on his arm. That's very generous, Mr. Blackwood. However, I'm not making decisions based solely on price. Business is business, Miss Montgomery. Sentiment has no place in it. Perhaps that's where we differ, sir. Good day. Eliza turned away, Thomas at her side. You're making a mistake, Blackwood called after them. One you'll regret. That night, Eliza was wakened by shouts and the acrid smell of smoke. Looking out her hotel window, she saw flames leaping from the roof of the marshal's office. People rushed about with buckets, forming a line from the water trough to the burning building. Throwing a shawl over her nightdress, Eliza hurried downstairs and outside. The night air was cold, but the heat from the fire warmed her face as she approached the chaotic scene. Where's the marshal? She asked a man hurrying past with a bucket. Inside, trying to save the records. Eliza's heart clenched with fear. The roof was beginning to collapse, sending showers of sparks into the night sky. Just as she was about to rush forward, Thomas emerged from the smoke-filled doorway, carrying a metal strongbox. His face was streaked with soot, his shirt singed. Thomas, she cried, forgetting propriety in her relief. He turned at her voice, his expression softening despite the dire circumstances. Eliza, you shouldn't be here. Are you hurt? Nothing serious. He set down the strongbox and joined the bucket line, working tirelessly until it became clear the building couldn't be saved. As dawn broke, the fire was finally extinguished, leaving only charred timbers and smoldering ruins. Thomas stood staring at the destruction, his face grim. "This wasn't an accident," he said when Eliza brought him coffee from the hotel. "Someone doused the back wall with coal oil. I found the empty can." "Blackwood," Eliza said with certainty. "Most likely, though we'll never prove it." Thomas took a sip of coffee. "The town council has offered temporary space in the courthouse, but most of the filed claims and deeds were destroyed." "Including mine?" "Fortunately, no. I kept your brother's papers in the strongbox, along with other important documents." Relief washed over her. "What will you do now?" "Rebuild. It's what we do out here." Thomas looked at her, his blue eyes intense despite his exhaustion. "Eliza, you should consider Winter's offer. Once you're gone from Silver Creek, Blackwood will have no reason to continue this vendetta. Is that what you want? For me to leave?" The question hung between them, fraught with unspoken feelings that had grown during their time together. "What I want," Thomas began, then stopped. "What I want doesn't matter. Your safety does." "It matters to me," Eliza said softly. Thomas looked at her for a long moment, then gently touched her cheek. "I want you to be happy and safe. If that means leaving Silver Creek, then yes, you should go. If it means staying—" He didn't finish the thought. "What if I'm not ready to decide yet?" Eliza asked. "What if I need more time to understand what I truly want? Then I'll do everything in my power to ensure you have that time." The next day, Eliza wrote to Winters, declining his offer for the present. Then she visited the town's lawyer and had him draw up papers appointing Thomas as the legal manager of her brother's claim. It was a bold move, but one that felt right. When she presented the papers to Thomas, he was stunned. "Eliza, this is your inheritance, your future." "I'm not giving it away, Thomas. I'm entrusting it to someone who shares my brother's values. Someone I've come to trust." She took a deep breath. "I've decided to stay in Silver Creek, at least for now. There's a vacant space next to the general store that would make a fine bookshop." Hope and uncertainty warred in Thomas's expression. "Silver Creek is a rough place for a woman alone." "I won't be alone. I'll have friends." And perhaps, she hesitated, perhaps something more, in time. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "In time," he agreed softly. "When you're certain." Blackwood made one final attempt to intimidate her, sending men to vandalize the cabin at the mine site. Thomas arrested them, and with testimony from miners tired of Blackwood's tactics, built a case strong enough to interest federal authorities. When marshals arrived from Denver with warrants, Blackwood fled, his empire crumbling behind him. Through the summer and into autumn, Eliza established her bookshop, creating a haven of knowledge and imagination in the frontier town. Thomas rebuilt his office and continued his work, their paths crossing daily, their connection deepening. On the anniversary of her arrival in Silver Creek, Thomas took Eliza back to the mountain claim that had brought her west. The aspen trees were turning gold, their leaves trembling in the crisp breeze like nature's own precious metal. "Your brother would be proud of what you've accomplished," Thomas said as they stood beside the cabin he had helped her restore. "I think he would be," Eliza agreed, "though not half as proud as I am of finding my own way." She turned to face Thomas, taking in the face that had become so dear to her. "I came west seeking closure, thinking I would sell Robert's claim and return to the life I knew. Instead, I found a beginning." Thomas took her hands in his. "Have you found what you want, Eliza Montgomery?" "I have," she said with certainty. "It isn't the gold or the land or even the bookshop, though I treasure them all. It's this place, these mountains." She smiled up at him. "It's you, Thomas Wilder. It has been for some time now." His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with the passion they had held in check for months. When they finally parted, breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I've loved you since that first day in my office," he confessed. "But I wanted you to choose this life, this place for yourself, not for me." "I've chosen both," Eliza told him. "And I've never been more certain of anything." As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, Thomas and Eliza stood together at the threshold of the future they would build, a future as vast and promising as the western sky above them.